you got to recite some of Roland's poetry. How did that affect you? Because these were the words coming from the man that you were representing.
Yeah, and I read all the letters that he wrote to Vera and Vera wrote to him. So it was kind of an honour to be able to play a real-life person. I've never played a historical real-life person before, and someone so recent, really, over the last 100 years. I think what's really sad about it, what the really moving thing is that his poems are great but underdeveloped. They're the poems of a 19-year-old, and he shows incredible talent and potential, and he never made it through, and he never got to develop that potential. And of so many, that's true in the First World War, that they wiped out a generation of very possibly very talented writers.
Can I ask as well, I didn't actually realise it was you until I saw you on the stage today. So you completely transformed, and was that a lovely opportunity for you as an actor, just to disappear into a role and really embody somebody? Yeah,
it was. It was nice to step away from the appearance that I have grown so accustomed to over the years because of Game of Thrones and because of other projects I've done. It was important for me getting into this. I went, I'm no beard and I need a wig. So that's sort of how I went for it, because otherwise it wouldn't work for a start. But also it was nice to be a completely different person for a while.
It was lovely watching the film. Is this beautiful relationship between a brother and a sister? What was that like? What was that like to play out?
Well, I mean, it was. I think because of Alicia and because of the way she works, and the character she plays in the film, she's a very, very, very strong-willed, very fearsome, steadfast woman. But very early on, it became very apparent to me that I was kind of, sort of exempt from that, really. She was actually very tender and gentle with me, and at first I thought, oh well, actually it's obviously I'm just irresistible, but obviously it wasn't. It was because she was hard at work trying to create a faithful relationship. So yeah, when you work in that way with an actor as gifted as Alicia is, it's a real joy, and I have to confess I've not seen the thing in its entirety, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. Yeah.
Well, when I was watching it this morning, one of the scenes I was watching between you and Alicia, where you're in hospital.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually sat there thinking that could be my brother, and for me watching it was the power of the writing, obviously the performances as well, but the writing as well is extremely powerful for you.
Absolutely, and I think reading it, that's the joy of Juliette's script. It's colloquial. They feel like real people. It's not a period walking costume piece. It's a bunch of real people talking in a way that young people talk to one another, and hopefully that makes it all the more relevant and poignant. I hope. I've not seen it.
Now, as an audience member, I couldn't help but get blown away from what I've seen today. So for you as an actor reading this script, you couldn't have put it down.
No, devastating, absolutely devastating. The most very pure love story, and the most anguished cry against war.
I mean, for you reading it, does it feel, even though it's a period piece, this is a very contemporary story, isn't it?
It is. Don't go to war. War is stupid. It destroys everything.
What was it about because you're playing the mother, that you particularly liked about playing? Because I see her at one point that she's particularly troubled.
Yes, I think she really has kind of a breakdown, but I think it's a generation of people who are unable to express themselves emotionally in a way that was adequate to the task. Everyone just sort of froze and crumbled. And
is that something that was admirable about Vera, because she was so spirited, because she did stand up for herself to her parents, which is brave?
Yeah, she's an extraordinary voice, I think.
I wanted to ask you, it's with regards to the poetry that's beautifully narrated by Kit. There's so much imagery in Roland's writing that was so beautifully complemented, and I wondered whether those were actually the locations that he was writing about.
They were. I mean, they were. They weren't actual physical locations they actually went, but we reproduced those locations, like the dead body with the violets. We made sure that it was as accurate to what he would have experienced, and that felt important to me. I make documentaries normally, and so to get my first feature and make this film, I wanted things to be truthful. I wanted an audience to feel the truth of this story.
when I saw the film, it was exhausting. Actually, I came out, and I mean that in a good way, because it was effective. And for you, having invested so much into it, when you finally wrapped and picture locked, it must have been very tough.
I was knackered, if I can use that word. I really was, actually. I was emotionally drained, and because you lived this story for months. I'd been on the film for about a year before filming, so it got into my bones, and seeing it realised, such superlative performances, did make me realise this really did happen. You know, she lost so much.
Watching the film, it's so consuming, and I just wondered, for you as the screenwriter of this, once you started this, I imagine you couldn't let it go, and it was all-consuming for you.
Absolutely, it was a real passion project for me. You know, I spent a lot of time researching the era, Vera's life, the life of the young men. Yeah, it was a really inspirational story to work on, and very all-consuming. Yeah.
The interesting thing for me watching the film now, I don't know whether this was that there wasn't time for it within the screenplay, but she didn't seem to have many female friends. Was that the case? She seemed to be detached from other women, really.
I think she was, actually, because she had a very sheltered life in Buxton. She was very, very close to her brother, and didn't necessarily make friends that easily. I think she had very intense friendships. I think her big, intense female friendship was with Winifred Holtby, who appears at the end of the film, and from there on they had a very intense friendship. But no, throughout the war I think Vera was very focused on the men in her life, her brother and her fiancé and her two male friends.
Is it interesting as well for you to have explored the relationships between her and her family, you know, her parents, because, you know, it's very different relationships to parents as we are now, and she seemed to be very spirited and stood up to them where you would think in that era we wouldn't necessarily.
That's what's so amazing about her. She feels very, very modern. I mean, she does when you read the book as well. She has a very modern voice, and I think there was a really big generation gap between her generation and the parents. Almost like the 60s generation and their parents. I think there's a parallel there. And I think the war exacerbated that. I think they were on the brink of breaking out from the constraints, and then the war came along and their parents didn't understand what all these young people fighting were going through, really. So I think there was a big generational gap. No one's fault, but...
and it seemed to be an era as well where people took a lot of pride and responsibility upon themselves as well. You know,
yes, I think they had that generation of young people coming of age at 19 or 20 had a real sense of duty and patriotism, and I think Vera certainly felt that they were collectively duped into sacrificing their lives in a war that felt like a sort of wholesale massacre at many points, at least. So I think that was her main motivation for writing the book, was so that those young men wouldn't be forgotten. The young men who'd given their lives.
And I would imagine as well, if I may be prudent enough to say, because this must become quite a personal thing for you, to have to let it go to a director, was that hard because you've put everything into it?
No, because James was so in tune with the script, you know, and when that happens it's a wonderful thing, because you know it needs to go to the next stage, and you're obviously incredibly keen for the right director to come and carry it forward, and he did that so beautifully and seamlessly. It was just wonderful, actually, yeah, for me.
This is such a powerful piece of writing, isn't it? So for you as a producer, there must have been quite a responsibility, isn't there?
Yes, it was definitely a responsibility to take on a beloved classic. You know, you want it to have integrity. You don't want to mess with it. You want to, obviously, you have to distill it because you can't do the whole thing. But we all work very hard to try and be as faithful as we could to the spirit of this work, which is loved by many readers.
Vera is such an inspirational person, isn't she, really? Can you tell us more about what resonated about her for you, really?
Yes, I loved the fight in Vera. I loved this indomitable spirit, that her life is a series of obstacles. She wants her education, she fights for an education, and then once she gets diverted from that by the war, she's determined to become a nurse. She's this very, very active person, and she met a few obstacles with the older nurses that she was working with. And then she fought to get to the front to try and be near her brother. And I was very moved by her insatiable desire to get to the heart of life and to so once she became a nurse, she actually ended up nursing German soldiers, and which really helped form her pacifist outlook on life, because she saw the utter absurdity of the war, that her brother was killing Germans and she was nursing them. And I loved the way that whatever was thrown at her, she kept running in the race, and she lost so many people and she could have been utterly defeated. But she's a sort of indestructible spirit, and she is, you know, deservedly an icon for that.
It's a period piece, obviously, but actually the theme of the film is universal, because war affects everybody, doesn't it, really? And I think there's a message to be sent in there as well, isn't it? The futility of war.
Absolutely, that's very much at the heart of this film, that we go through, it's a rites of passage story with Vera, where she begins very naive about war and its prospects, and through her experiences she really recognises fellow feeling with the enemy and the absurdity of the war, and you know, a horror of man's inhumanity to man. And it's not really just about the First World War. She ended up writing this elegy which is about all lost youth in all wars.